Have you ever looked at the stars and just wondered? Wondered why some people seem to have everything, while others, well, they're just trying to survive the next hour? I used to think that way. I used to think that success was something that just happened to lucky people, a gift from the universe, maybe. But one day, something changed. It wasn't a loud realization. It was quiet, almost invisible. It started in a small town, a place surrounded by mountains that felt more like walls than scenery. And it started with a young man named John. John was 20 years old, that age where you feel like the world is wide open, but also like you're standing behind a locked door. He lived in this quiet town where the air always smelled like pine trees and cold stone. It was beautiful, sure, but beauty doesn't pay the bills. John had these big, heavy dreams. He didn't just want to work, he wanted to build something. He wanted to own a chain of restaurants, to be a successful entrepreneur. But in his reality was different. His father, Mark, was a mechanic, always with grease under his fingernails and a tired smile. His mother, Claire, spent her days cleaning other people's beautiful houses just to make ends meet. And then there was Sarah, his younger sister. She was only 10. To her, John wasn't just a brother, he was a hero. She looked at him with these bright, trusting eyes, believing he could do anything. One evening, it was particularly cold, the kind of cold that crawls into your bones and stays there. John was sitting outside his small, weathered house. He was looking at those stars, those distant silver points of light. He whispered to himself, "I want to give them a better life. I want to give Sarah a hero she deserves. But how? How do I start when we barely have enough to even survive?" It's a heavy question, isn't it? Maybe you've asked it too. How do you build a mountain when you don't even have a single stone? It's easy to feel stuck when the gap between where you are and where you want to be is so wide. You look at the distant shore and think, I could never swim that far. But the secret? The secret is that you don't have to swim the whole way in one breath. You just have to start moving your arms. The next morning, John sat down with his father. Mark was drinking his coffee, his hands shaking slightly from years of heavy work. John shared his dreams, the restaurants, the success, the change. Mark didn't laugh. He didn't tell him to be realistic. He just sighed, a long, slow sound. "John," he said, "dreams are not free. If you want something, you have to fight for it. You have to pay for it with more than just hope. Start with what you have, even if it feels small, even if it feels like nothing." John thought about that all day. Dreams are not free. It sounds harsh, doesn't it? We like to think that dreaming is the easy part, but to make a dream real, that's where the cost comes in. An idea struck him while he was walking through the town square. He noticed something. People here, they loved fresh bread. Who doesn't, right? But the problem was the only good bakery was miles away. People had to travel for hours just for a loaf of warm bread. John decided right then and there he was going to sell fresh bread locally. But there was a problem, a big, empty pocket kind of problem. John had zero money, nothing, not even enough to buy the first batch of bread to sell. Most people would stop there, wouldn't they? They'd say, "Well, I tried. I have no capital." But John, he decided to take a chance. He walked for miles, his boots clicking on the dusty road, until he reached the big bakery on the edge of the next county. The owner was a man named Mr. Anderson. Now, Mr. Anderson was, well, he was grumpy. He was the kind of man who looked at the world through narrowed eyes, trusting no one. He had seen hundreds of young people come and go, all with big ideas but very little backbone. John walked into that bakery. The smell was incredible: yeast, sugar, and warmth. He stood before Mr. Anderson and felt small, but he spoke firmly. "Mr. Anderson, I want to sell your bread in my town, but I don't have the money to buy it from you yet. Can you trust me for just 1 week? I will sell the bread. I will return every cent I owe you, and I will keep just a tiny profit for myself." Mr. Anderson stopped what he was doing. He raised an eyebrow, looking John up and down. "And why should I trust you, young man?" he asked. His voice was like gravel. John didn't blink. He said, "Because I am determined, because I have a family that needs me to succeed, and because I will work harder than anyone else to prove you made the right choice." He knew that trust was the first thing he had to earn. Trust wasn't free either. You pay for it with your integrity. There was a silence, a long, agonizing pause where the only sound was the crackling of the ovens. Finally, Mr. Anderson nodded. "All right, I'll give you the bread for 1 week. But listen to me. If you fail to pay me back every single penny, don't you ever, ever come back here again." John was thrilled. He felt like he had just won the lottery, even though he'd actually just signed up for incredibly hard work. Very early the next morning, at 4 a.m., when the world is still blue and silent, John carried the bread back to his town. It was heavy. His arms ached. His legs felt like lead. But he set up a small wooden stand near the park. Every person who walked by, he greeted them with a smile. "Fresh bread, warm and delicious," he'd call out. At first, people were hesitant. In a small town, people are careful. They didn't know if the bread was good. They didn't know this young man's story. But John didn't get discouraged. He offered free samples. He talked to them. He shared the warmth. By the end of that first day, he had sold every single loaf. He walked back to Mr. Anderson that evening and paid him back. Mr. Anderson didn't say much. He just blinked and said, "You kept your word. Come back tomorrow." And that became John's life. Wake up at 4 a.m., walk the miles, carry the heavy bread, sell with passion, pay it back. For 2 months, he didn't buy anything for himself. Not a new shirt, not a treat, nothing. He saved every penny of his small profit. Finally, he had enough. He bought a small cart. It wasn't fancy. It was just wood and wheels. But to John, it was a Mercedes. It made his work easier. It allowed him to carry more. It was the first physical proof that his hard work was paying off. It wasn't just a cart. It was a promise kept to himself. One afternoon, a regular customer, an old woman who always bought 2 loaves, looked at him and said, "John, you're so good at selling this. Why don't you bake your own bread? You're giving Mr. Anderson a lot of your potential profit. If you baked it, you'd be the one in control." The idea was like a spark in a dry forest. It excited him, but it also terrified him. He had never baked anything in his life. He knew how to sell, but he didn't know the science of flour and water. This was the moment John realized the deepest truth of his journey.
Nothing is free, not even success, especially not knowledge. If he wanted to grow, he had to take a risk. He had to learn something that felt impossible. He had to be willing to be a beginner again. And being a beginner is one of the hardest things for an adult to do. It's messy, it's embarrassing, but it's the only way to reach the next level. The next morning, John approached Mr. Anderson again, but this time the question was different. Mr. Anderson, can you teach me? Can you teach me how to bake? Mr. Anderson frowned. Why should I? If I teach you, you won't buy my bread anymore. That's bad for my business, isn't it? John looked him right in the eye. You're right, he said, but I will never forget the man who gave me my first chance. When I succeed, I'll make sure to help your bakery too. We can grow together. Maybe I can sell your specialty cakes in my shop one day.
Mr. Anderson looked at the young man. He saw the grease on his hands, the dust on his boots, and the fire in his eyes. He saw himself 40 years ago. Fine, he said, but baking isn't like selling, John. It takes patience, it takes time, it takes failing a lot. If you're ready to fail, I'll teach you. The lesson started even earlier now, 3 a.m. While your neighbors are dreaming, John was mixing flour. He was kneading dough until his wrists felt like they were on fire. He was learning the temperament of the ovens, and at first it was a disaster. His bread came out hard as a rock, or it was raw in the middle. Sometimes it tasted nothing but salt. One day, after ruining an entire batch of expensive ingredients, John sat on the floor of the bakery. He felt defeated. He felt small. He felt like a failure. He thought to himself, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I should just go back to the cart. Maybe this is my limit. But then he remembered his father's words, dreams are not free. He realized that his frustration, his tired muscles, his burnt bread, that was the price he was paying for his future. To gain something new, you have to lose something old. In this case, John was losing his comfort, he was losing his pride, and in exchange, he was gaining a skill that no one could ever take away from him. Giving up was the only way to truly fail. So, he stood up, he wiped the flour from his face, and he started again. He practiced every single step, mixing, kneading, waiting, watching. He learned that the dough has a life of its own. You can't rush it, you can't force it, you have to work with it. Slowly, the bread started to change. It started to smell right. It started to feel right. After 2 weeks of intense, exhausting work, Mr. Anderson handed him a loaf from the oven. It was golden. It was perfect. You're ready, John, he said, and for the first time, Mr. Anderson smiled. John was overjoyed. He rented a small, old oven and began baking at home. His house was filled with the most amazing smell, the smell of success. His family was amazed. Sarah, his little sister, would help him pack the bread into bags. His mother would make him tea while he worked late into the night. He wasn't just selling bread anymore. He was making cookies, pastries, little cakes. The town loved him. They said his bread tasted better than anything they'd ever had, because it did. It tasted like hard work. It tasted like a dream coming true. His family finally began to breathe a little easier. The tension in the house, that constant worry about money, it started to fade, replaced by the scent of warm cinnamon and sugar. But, as we know, life isn't a straight line. Just when things were looking perfect, a new challenge appeared. A new bakery opened right in the middle of town. It was owned by a man named Eric, and Eric
Eric had money. He had a big, fancy shop with bright neon signs and beautiful decorations. He had professional bakers and expensive equipment. People were curious. They started going to Eric's shop instead of John's small stand. John watched his sales drop day after day. He felt that old familiar fear creeping back in. What if he lost everything? What if Eric's money was too much for John's hard work to beat? It was a different kind of pain, seeing your customers, the people you thought were your friends, walking past your cart with Eric's fancy bags. Instead of panicking, John did something brave. He listened. He asked his customers, "What do you like about the new shop? What can I do better?" Some said the decorations were pretty. Others said the designs on the cakes were beautiful. John realized he needed to grow again. He couldn't just be a baker. He had to be a businessman. He had to be a designer. He had to be an architect of experiences. He used his savings, the little he had left, to paint his cart. He added bright, cheerful decorations. He even spent his only free hours in the library watching videos on how to decorate cakes. He was paying the price of success once again with his time and his energy. He realized that if he wanted to stay relevant, standing still was the same as moving backward. Slowly, very slowly, the customers came back. One evening, an elderly woman came to his cart. She had been a customer of Eric's for a week. She looked at John and said, "I've seen many young men give up when times get hard, but you didn't. You didn't complain about the competition. You just got better. That's why I'm back. That's why we trust you." Her words were worth more than 1,000 sales. They were the proof that character matters, that quality matters, and that people notice when you refuse to quit. Months passed. John's business grew until the cart wasn't enough. He saved every penny, lived as simply as possible, and finally he saved enough to rent a small shop. It wasn't as big as Eric's fancy place. It wasn't as modern, but it was warm. It was welcoming. It was filled with heart. He named it John's Fresh Bakes. Every morning he woke up before the sun, baked his heart into his bread, and opened the doors with a genuine smile. His family became his staff. Sarah, now 11, loved talking to the customers. She was the heart of the front counter. His mother managed the accounts, her eyes no longer tired but sharp and focused. They were a team. They were a success. But life was not done testing John. One stormy night, the kind of night where the wind sounds like a wolf howling, John was closing up. He was tired but happy. As he was locking the back door, he smelled something. Not the smell of bread, not the smell of sugar. It was smoke. He rushed into the kitchen and saw a nightmare. A small fire had started near the old oven. A faulty wire, a freak accident. John grabbed water, grabbed a blanket, and fought the flames with everything he had. He managed to stop it before it burned the whole building down, but much of his expensive equipment, his heart and soul, was ruined. The walls were black with soot. The smell was bitter. The next morning, the townspeople gathered outside. Some looked at the soot-covered windows and sighed. "Oh no," they whispered. "Poor John. What will he do now?" Others whispered more darkly. "Maybe this is it. Maybe he's finally out of luck. You can't fight fate forever." John heard them. He stood in the middle of his ruined kitchen, his hands black from the fire, his heart feeling like it was made of lead. He felt heartbroken. He felt like the universe was telling him to give up. "Why me?" he asked the empty room. "Why after all that work?" But he didn't stay down. He took a deep breath, a breath that tasted like ash, and he made a plan. He stood outside his bakery and told the crowd, "This is just a challenge. I've faced struggles before, and I will face this too. I won't give up on this town, and I won't give up on my family. He didn't wait for a miracle. He didn't wait for the government or a rich stranger to save him. He went back to Mr. Anderson, who had since retired. "Mr. Anderson, I need your advice. What would you do if I were me?" Mr. Anderson looked at his former student. He saw the soot, he saw the exhaustion, but he also saw the same fire he'd seen 2 years ago. "John," he said with a small smile, "you already know the answer. You've taught yourself that nothing is free. You've paid for your success with your sweat. Now you have to pay for your recovery with your courage. Work harder, believe in yourself, and give the people a reason to believe in you too."
Inspired, John didn't give up. He started baking at home again, using the small equipment he had left. He told his customers, "I'm still here. I'll keep serving you, even if the menu is a bit smaller for now." And you know what happened? The town, they didn't just buy his bread, they helped him. Some brought ingredients, others brought paint. A few of the local handymen spent their weekends helping him repair the shop for free. Why? Because they had seen him work. They had seen his character. They wanted to help someone who was so clearly helping himself. John realized that this was the most important lesson of all. When you work hard, when you never give up, people don't just see your success, they see your spirit. And people will always support a spirit that refuses to be broken. After months of rebuilding, the shop reopened. It was more beautiful than before, not because of the paint, but because of the stories embedded in every wall. On the day of the grand reopening, even the mayor came by. He told the crowd, "John is a true inspiration. He's shown us all that with determination, anything is possible." He didn't just build a bakery, he built a community. John stood before the crowd, looking at his family, at Mr. Anderson, and at the people who had stood by him. "I want to thank you all," he said. "You've taught me that nothing in life is free, not success, not respect, not love. Everything must be earned. But when you earn it, when you truly pay the price, no fire can ever take it away from you." From that day on, John's Fresh Bakes wasn't just a place to buy food, it was a symbol of hope. People from other towns started visiting, not just for the bread, but to meet the young man who refused to quit. John's story teaches us 4 things that I want you to remember today. First, dreams are not free. They require sacrifice. Second, failure is not the end. It's a classroom. Every mistake is a lesson in disguise. Third, help yourself first. When the world sees your effort, the world will want to be part of it. And finally, never, ever give up. The darkest moments are often just the heavy curtain before the stage lights come on. John didn't just build a business, he built the life of purpose. He built a legacy of pride for his sister Sarah. And you, whatever your dream is, whatever mountain you're facing, remember John. Remember the baker who started with nothing but a promise and a long walk. This journey wasn't just about flour and water. It was about the fire in his soul that no obstacle could put out. It was about showing us all that the cost of your future is simply the effort you give today. Every single drop of sweat, every late night, every moment of doubt you push through, that is you paying the price for the person you are becoming. So don't be afraid of the work. Don't be afraid of the long road, because when you finally reach that mountaintop, you'll realize the view was worth every single step. Nothing is free, but with a heart that refuses to stop, everything is possible.